There's a moment that happens in every great conversation, every compelling speech, every piece of content that you just can't look away from. It's that split second where your brain makes a choice, usually without you even realizing it. Stay or go, listen or scroll, engage or ignore. And what most people don't understand is that this moment, this tiny fraction of time, can be engineered, not through manipulation, not through deception, but through a principle so powerful that it's been mistaken for something darker for over 500 years. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that made him infamous. His name became synonymous with cunning, with ruthlessness, with getting what you want at any cost. But here's what history got wrong. Machiavelli wasn't teaching people how to manipulate. He was teaching them how to see reality clearly. And buried in his most controversial work, The Prince, is a technique so effective at capturing attention that when you first hear about it, it sounds almost illegal. It sounds like the kind of thing you shouldn't be allowed to do. But it's not only legal, it's ethical. And it's been hiding in plain sight this entire time. The technique is simple in concept, but profound in application. Machiavelli observed that people are hardwired to pay attention to things that feel forbidden, dangerous, or controversial. Not because they're bad people, but because our brains evolved to prioritize potential threats and unusual information. In the ancestral environment, ignoring something that seemed dangerous could get you killed. So we developed an attention system that automatically flags anything that breaks the pattern, anything that feels like it might be important, precisely because it feels wrong. This is why clickbait works. This is why conspiracy theories spread. This is why we slow down to look at accidents on the highway. Our brains are constantly scanning for anomalies, for things that don't fit, for information that seems like it might give us an edge or protect us from harm. Machiavelli didn't create this tendency. He simply noticed it and understood how to work with it rather than against it. But here's where most people go wrong. They take this insight and use it to deceive. They create false urgency. They manufacture controversy where none exists. They promise secrets they don't have and solutions they can't deliver. This is manipulation, and it's exactly what gives influence a bad name. It's also completely unnecessary. The ethical version of Machiavelli's attention hook works differently. Instead of creating false tension, you identify real tension that already exists. Instead of manufacturing controversy, you shine light on genuine contradictions that people haven't noticed. Instead of promising forbidden knowledge, you deliver genuine insights that challenge common assumptions. The feeling of transgression is real, but it comes from truth-telling, not deception. Think about it this way. When someone tells you something that goes against everything you've been taught, your first instinct is often discomfort. Not because the information is wrong, but because it forces you to reconsider beliefs you've held for a long time. This discomfort, this cognitive friction, is what captures attention. And when handled ethically, it becomes the gateway to genuine transformation. Machiavelli used this technique throughout The Prince. He would state things that were obviously true but socially unacceptable to say out loud. He would describe how power actually works rather than how people wished it worked. And the result was a book so controversial that it's still being debated 5 centuries later. But notice what made it controversial. Not lies, not manipulation. Truth delivered in a way that couldn't be ignored. So how do you apply this ethically in your own communication? The first step is understanding the difference between shock value and genuine insight. Shock value is empty calories for attention. It gets eyes on you for a moment, but it doesn't nourish. Genuine insight, on the other hand, might feel uncomfortable at first, but it leaves people better off for having encountered it. The test is simple. After the initial surprise wears off, does the person feel manipulated or enlightened? If they feel manipulated, you've crossed the line. If they feel enlightened, you've used the technique ethically. The second step is to identify beliefs in your field or niche that are widely held, but rarely examined. Every industry has them. Every community has them. These are the things that everyone assumes to be true because everyone else assumes them to be true. Often, they're not entirely wrong, but they're incomplete or outdated or oversimplified. When you can articulate why these beliefs are insufficient and offer a more nuanced or accurate perspective, you create that feeling of forbidden knowledge without actually hiding anything. For example, in the world of productivity, there's a widespread belief that more planning leads to better results. On the surface, this seems obviously true, but when you look deeper, you find that excessive planning often becomes a form of procrastination. It gives you the feeling of progress without requiring you to face the discomfort of actual execution. Pointing this out feels almost transgressive because it challenges something that sounds so reasonable. But it's not manipulation, it's pattern recognition shared openly. The third step is framing. This is where Machiavelli was especially brilliant. He would often introduce controversial ideas by acknowledging their controversial nature. He would say, in effect, "I know this sounds bad, but bear with me. This does two things simultaneously. It validates the reader's discomfort, making them feel understood rather than attacked. And it creates a sense of being let in on something, of gaining access to a perspective that most people don't have the courage to voice." When you frame an insight by acknowledging its uncomfortable nature, you're doing something subtle but powerful. You're signaling that you understand the social cost of what you're saying, but you're saying it anyway because the truth matters more than comfort. This builds trust. It shows that you're not trying to manipulate, you're trying to illuminate. And that distinction is everything. The fourth step is evidence and nuance. This is where ethical influence separates itself completely from manipulation. When you make a claim that challenges conventional wisdom, you need to back it up. Not with cherry-picked examples that support your narrative, but with honest analysis that acknowledges complexity. Machiavelli did this constantly. He would make a bold statement, then immediately explore its limits, exceptions, and context where it might not apply. This is actually what makes the attention hook sustainable. The initial controversial statement gets people to lean in. The evidence and nuance keeps them there. And the combination creates an experience that feels both exciting and trustworthy. You're not just telling people what they want to hear. You're not just shocking them for the sake of shock. You're walking them through a genuine process of discovery. Consider how this plays out in practice. Let's say you're creating content about personal finance. The conventional wisdom is that you should pay off all debt as quickly as possible because debt is bad. This is what most people believe, and it's not entirely wrong, but it's also not entirely right. Some debt, particularly low interest debt, can actually be financially advantageous to maintain if you can invest the money you would have used to pay it off at a higher rate of return. Now, if you lead with debt can be good, you'll get attention. It sounds wrong, it feels almost irresponsible, and that's precisely what makes people stop and listen. But here's where ethics comes in. You need to immediately follow up with nuance. Not all debt, not in all circumstances, not without considering risk tolerance and personal situation. The attention hook gets them to the table. The nuanced explanation gives them something valuable to take away. The fifth step is respect for autonomy. This is perhaps the most important distinction between ethical influence and manipulation. When you use Machiavelli's attention hook ethically, you're not trying to make people do something. You're trying to make them think about something. You're presenting information and analysis that they're free to accept, reject, or modify based on their own judgment. Manipulation tries to bypass critical thinking. Ethical influence invites it. The controversial framing gets past people's initial defenses, but what you do once you have their attention determines whether you're helping or harming. If you use that attention to present one-sided arguments and pressure tactics, you're manipulating. If you use it to present balanced information and encourage independent thought, you're influencing ethically. This is exactly what Machiavelli was doing, though it's been misunderstood for centuries. He wasn't telling princes what to do. He was showing them how power actually operates, then leaving them to make their own choices. The amoral reputation comes from the fact that he described effective tactics without always adding moral judgment. But describing reality isn't the same as endorsing it, and giving people accurate information about how the world works respects their autonomy more than shielding them from uncomfortable truths. The sixth step is consistency over time. One controversial take might get attention. A pattern of controversial takes that all prove insightful builds authority. This is where the long-term power of the technique reveals itself. When people come to trust that your willingness to say uncomfortable things is paired with genuine accuracy and good faith, your ability to capture and hold attention compounds. Think about the thought leaders and creators you trust most. Chances are, they're not the ones who always tell you what you want to hear. They're the ones who occasionally make you uncomfortable but consistently prove that the discomfort was worth it. They challenge you, but they challenge you in ways that make you better. That's the difference between attention seeking and attention earning. The seventh step is emotional awareness. When you use a technique that triggers discomfort or surprise, you need to be conscious of the emotional journey you're creating. The initial reaction to a controversial statement is often defensive. People's guards go up, they prepare to argue or dismiss. Your job is to acknowledge this reaction and guide them through it, not to exploit it. This means being genuinely empathetic about why the conventional wisdom exists in the first place. Often, widely held beliefs are comforting or serve important psychological functions. When you challenge them, you're not just challenging ideas, you're potentially disrupting someone's sense of security or identity. Doing this ethically requires care, not just cleverness. Machiavelli, for all his reputation, actually demonstrated this kind of care in subtle ways. He would often explain not just what was true, but why people believed something else. He understood that beliefs aren't just intellectual positions, they're emotional anchors. And changing someone's mind isn't about proving them wrong, it's about helping them see a larger picture that includes their current view as one piece of a more complex puzzle. The eighth step is application. An attention hook without actionable insight is just entertainment. And while entertainment has value, transformation requires more. Once you've captured attention with a provocative insight and backed it up with solid reasoning, you need to translate it into something people can actually do. This is where many creators fail. They get good at the controversial statement that stops the scroll. They might even be good at the explanation that follows, but then they stop. They don't bridge the gap between, here's an interesting way to think about this, and here's what you can do with this new perspective. The result is an audience that feels informed but not empowered. Ethical influence closes this loop. It says, here's a truth most people miss. Here's why it matters. Here's the evidence. And here's how you can use this understanding to make better decisions in your own life. The attention hook is just the beginning of a complete value delivery system. The ninth step is invitation, not coercion. The most ethical uses of Machiavelli's attention hook end with an open invitation. I've shown you this perspective. It's worth considering. What you do with it is up to you. This stands in stark contrast to manipulative approaches that try to create urgency or fear to force immediate action. When you respect people's autonomy this way, something interesting happens. Some people will dismiss what you've shared. That's fine. They weren't ready for it, or it doesn't apply to their situation. But others will take the insight and run with it. They'll adapt it, improve it, make it their own. And because you didn't try to control their response, they'll credit you for the inspiration rather than resenting you for the pressure. This long-term relationship building is actually more valuable than any individual conversion or sale. It creates true fans rather than reluctant customers. It builds communities rather than just audiences. And it compounds over time in ways that manipulative tactics never can. The 10th and final step is self-examination. The line between ethical influence and manipulation can sometimes be subtle, and it's easy to drift across it without noticing. This is why regular self-reflection is crucial. Ask yourself honestly, am I saying this because it's true and valuable, or because it will get attention? Am I backing up my claims with real evidence, or am I cherry picking? Am I respecting people's autonomy, or am I trying to bypass their judgment? These questions matter because intent matters. The same technique can be ethical or manipulative depending on why and how you use it. Machiavelli's attention hook is a tool, and like any tool, it reflects the values of the person wielding it. Used with integrity, it becomes a powerful way to cut through noise and deliver insights that genuinely help people. Used carelessly or cynically, it becomes just another manipulation tactic. So here's what makes this approach truly safe and effective. It's safe because it's built on truth and respect. You're not tricking people or putting them at risk. You're simply presenting accurate information in a way that overcomes their initial resistance to hearing it. And it's effective because it works with human psychology rather than against it. You're using the same attentional mechanisms that make us notice the unusual and potentially important, but you're directing that attention toward genuine value rather than empty shock. The illegal sounding part is just our intuition telling us that something this powerful shouldn't be allowed. But that intuition is based on a world where powerful techniques are usually reserved for those willing to manipulate. In reality, ethical communicators can and should use every effective tool available, as long as they use them with integrity. Think about what this means for your own work. Whether you're creating content, building a business, teaching, or just trying to communicate more effectively in your daily life, you have access to one of the most powerful attention-capturing techniques ever identified. You don't need to manipulate. You don't need to deceive. You just need to identify genuine tensions, frame them courageously, support them with evidence, and respect people's ability to think for themselves. This is the real lesson from Machiavelli. Not that the ends justify the means, which is what most people think he said, but that understanding reality clearly and communicating that understanding honestly is more powerful than any amount of sugarcoating or manipulation. The truth, presented well, is the ultimate attention hook, because on some level, we all know when someone is showing us reality versus selling us a fantasy, and we're hungry for reality, even when it's uncomfortable. So the next time you're trying to cut through the noise, trying to make people pay attention to something important, remember this: you don't need to deceive them. You don't need to manufacture urgency or create false scarcity. You just need to find the uncomfortable truth that matters, frame it in a way that acknowledges its uncomfortable nature, and then deliver genuine value once you have their attention. That's Machiavelli's real gift to us. Not a handbook for manipulation, but a reminder that honest, courageous communication about difficult truths will always outperform comfortable lies. The attention hook isn't the controversy itself. It's the courage to say what's true even when it sounds wrong. And when you pair that courage with genuine care for the people you're communicating with, you create something powerful. Not persuasion through trickery, but influence through trust. If this perspective challenged something you believed or gave you a new way to think about communication and influence, that's exactly the point. That mild discomfort you might be feeling right now is your attention system recognizing that you've encountered something worth considering. And what you do with it next is entirely up to you. That's ethical influence in action, not manipulation, not coercion, just truth delivered in a way that's hard to ignore, paired with respect for your ability to decide what it means for you. Now here's what I want you to do. If you found value in this exploration of Machiavelli's attention hook and how to use it ethically, subscribe to this channel. Not because you'll miss out if you don't, but because more content like this is coming and you might find it valuable. And drop a comment below telling me about a time when someone captured your attention by saying something that sounded wrong but turned out to be insightful. What was it? How did it change your thinking? Let's build a community of people who value honest, courageous communication over comfortable platitudes. I'll see you in the next one.